Hello, welcome everybody to the latest in the WDDTY talk series. Today we have an extra special treat. Every time it is a treat, but it's extra special this time. We have the wonderful Dr. Raymond Perrin on with us. And if any of you are suffering from chronic fatigue, or indeed have friends who are, or you have had, you really got to watch this one, because his approach to the problem is absolutely radical and transformative. So he's going to explain a lot about what he's been doing these past 30 years with the condition in a moment. So we'll introduce Raymond in half a second. We also have Molly, who'll be fielding your questions, and I know you have lots of questions. Oh, wonderful to have this chance to talk directly to Raymond. Molly, can you remind people how they can put a question in the box?
Yeah, of course. So if you just hover over your Zoom screen, there's a little tab at the bottom that says Q&A. So if you just click that and pop them in there, then I'll feed them to Dr. Perrin.
Thanks, Molly. So this call is going to be about an hour, and half of it is going to be Q&A between myself and Raymond, leaving you plenty of time to ask your particular questions of Raymond, and he's here on hand to answer them. Well, let me first introduce Raymond. He's a registered osteopath and neuroscientist. Quite an unusual mix there. He's obviously specializes in ME, CFS, and more recently long COVID, which we'll be talking about as well. He has a number of academic positions, and he's an honorary clinical research fellow at the University of Manchester, an honorary senior lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire. He's obviously been practicing osteopathy forever, and has been specializing in CFS ME since about 1990, I think. So we're in remarkably good hands. Raymond, welcome to the talk today.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. It's great to be here again. So,
thank you. Yes, Raymond has been at our conference a few times, and I think I've interviewed him virtually for another show, and he's tremendous value, this man. You really do want to sort of take notes and pay good attention, because he's very good indeed. Raymond, I suppose I'm going to start from base camp here, really from what you do and all the rest of it. But essentially, I mean, there's quite a phrase which struck me in one of your books. I thought, and he said that CFS ME is a biomechanical disease. Who would have thought? Yeah. And you've developed a whole series of osteopathic manipulations to help people overcome the condition. Now, I must say, if I suffer from chronic fatigue, going to the osteopath is not exactly the first thing I think of doing.
No.
So could you explain just some of the basics of why we should go to the osteopath, or particularly go to your practitioners who practice the Perrin technique itself?
Well, I met a chap just the other day. I was in London, and I met this man who said his sister's suffering from long COVID. And I said, well, it's very similar to ME/CFS. And I wrote the paper on predicting long COVID, which we'll talk about later. But I wrote the sorry, phone's flashing in the background there. I wrote this paper called Into the Looking Glass Post-COVID-19. And it was published, and now it's been cited by over 240 journals, and it's every week we get another citation, because I knew that this was going to happen. There was going to be a post-COVID-19 syndrome, now we call long COVID. And I knew that because of what's happened before, but also with my work with ME. And so this guy said to me, his sister's in America, and can he help in any way? And I said, well, I probably can help. We've got practitioners I've just been training. And he said, but can you explain to me, because nobody else can explain to me. So can you explain to me in just a couple of sentences what's going wrong? And because nobody else can. I said, yeah, of course, easy. So that's what I'm going to do now to you, Brian.
Okay, good.
So with ME, CFS, and fibromyalgia, and long COVID, and quite a few other disorders, their disorders are what I call neurolymphatic disorders. Basically, in 1989 and the early 90s, I came up with a radical hypothesis that said there's a drainage system of the brain into the lymphatic system, and it's working the wrong way. Instead of draining out of the brain and the spinal cord, which is a continuation of the brain, it drains backwards, causing toxins to build up in the brain and in the spinal cord. And it hits certain areas of the brain that causes dysfunction. So every single patient is different because there's different parts of the brain. The brain is made up of 100 billion neurons. So every single, and there's trillions and trillions of synapses with loads of different types of chemicals. Each one of those can be affected by thousands, tens of thousands of different toxins. So every person is different. There's not one patient the same. And basically this buildup of toxins affects different areas of the brain, which causes all the symptoms we see with ME, CFS, and long-COVID. And the Perrin technique I've developed is a way of draining these toxins away and getting the lymphatic system of the brain working again. Basically, it's going the wrong way because as the poisons build up, it hits a major area of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the balance mechanism for the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system controls the lymphatics. The sympathetic nerves control the lymphatics and pump them the right way. But if they're going wrong, they'll pump the wrong way. So that's basically what's happening with ME, CFS, and long COVID. The same thing's happening. Toxins are coming into the brain. The virus is getting into the brain. The spike proteins are getting into the brain. They're causing inflammatory changes. They're causing toxic overload, cytokines, which are inflammatory toxins, and they're not draining away. They're draining the wrong way. And that's what's happening with ME. When you have an infection, you have this post-viral fatigue. When you have injuries, you get this buildup of toxins. When you have stress, you get the buildup of toxins. When you have, and especially injury and mechanical. And if the mechanics don't work properly, the drainage doesn't work properly. The drainage is actually proper fluids draining out the brain in certain spaces. And if they're mechanically irritated by bad posture, by trauma in the past, it can lead to a buildup of toxins and a failure for these drainage systems to work. Wow. So that's a bit more than 2 sentences, but that's it in a nutshell.
Well, that is very radical, isn't it? Because I mean, for the longest time, just sticking with chronic fatigue for a moment, before we go on to long COVID, I mean, for the longest time, they saw it as a, almost like a psychological disorder. Now they grudgingly accept that it must have a viral genesis. But you're saying, well, yes, it can have, but it can also have a physical genesis. Trauma, injury could also lead to chronic fatigue symptoms.
The virus is never the cause.
Right.
People who have this post-viral condition, it's never the cause. The problem's there long before the virus. The problem's there mechanically when if they're usually very active people with ME, and they put a lot of strain through their spine, so the spine doesn't develop properly. So it causes a problem in the drainage. They've usually had trauma to the head in some way, or even from birth. Wow. In fact, we see a lot more patients with ME who are first born than the younger siblings, because they have the trauma of a firstborn baby going through the birth canal is much greater than their siblings, usually much longer births, more pressure on their cranium. So, or they've had injuries before. So we see this again and again and again, patterns forming that the problem's been there, and the virus is the final trigger. There's a buildup of toxins over the years where people have had tonsillitis, their lymphatics haven't been working properly for years. They've had sinusitis, they've had all sorts of lethargy problems, they've had concentration problems, they've had headaches, they've had migraines, they've had a history of so many different things, and then suddenly they get this one virus, maybe what years ago used to be Epstein-Barr virus was the common one, what caused glandular fever. And this was the trigger. Why was it such an obvious trigger? Because why is it called glandular fever? Epstein-Barr virus is a virus that actually attacks the lymphatic system. So this was the final trigger for the, and this is what's happening with COVID. It's not the cause. So billions of people have had COVID,
Right.
but only millions have had long COVID. Why haven't everybody had long COVID? Because their neurolymphatic system works. If it's compromised in the beginning, then you're more prone to things like ME.
And that compromise has to be something physical.
What we've seen are physical things going wrong with the body, and there are signs. I've discovered 5 major physical signs that show this drainage system is not working properly, and that the spine is not working, and the cranium drainage is not working. These are 5 physical signs that's in my book. And these 5 physical signs can be examined by trained practitioners to see if they've got this. And every ME patient I've seen, and I've seen probably about 3,000 patients now over the years, every one of them has got physical problems, and the same, that's what the link is. That's the common link, these 5 physical signs.
That's extraordinary.
Now, the 5 physical signs were studied in a paper we published in the British Medical Journal. And what they did, they showed that practitioners using my signs, only my signs, no history, no symptoms, showed around an 86% accuracy in diagnosing ME using the physical signs. We had an NHS physician doing standard reflexes, neurological signs that they do in the hospitals, and also looking at orthopedic rheumatological signs like, can they stand up, can they walk, can they move, do they look ill as well? And he only got 44% without questions about symptoms, without history. They were all silent. It was a randomized blind control study.
Wow.
And it showed that the patients actually if they were examined using Perrin technique, just the physical signs were almost double the accuracy. Now, with the history and with the symptoms, we get to an almost 100% accuracy in diagnosing.
These 5 signs, Raymond, are they things that a layman would understand if you tell them?
Yes, mostly are. But the beautiful thing is that there are 5 physical signs, but 2 of them were more accurate than any others, and to the point where you only need really 2 to add to the diagnosis, to the value. So and these 2 are just basically spinal mechanical problems, and also tenderness in the what we call the celiac plexus, the solar plexus area, which is a big area of sympathetic nerves in the abdomen. The solar plexus, it's a part where boxers can knock you out in 2 ways. Can knock you out in your head, or go for the body blow. They go for the solar plexus. They hit that hard enough, the sympathetic nervous system shuts down and you drop. And this is irritated in most ME patients quite badly. In all patients, some patients it's really tender, and it's inflamed there. And in the spine, we see inflammation, we see heat, we see signs of problems in everybody that we see with ME, and also fibromyalgia as well. Fibromyalgia.
And you say with injury, it has to be an injury to the brain or spine?
It doesn't have to be an injury. It could be postural problems. It could be mechanical problems in the wrong position. So people could be doing a lot of sports, and their spine develops slightly wrongly because they're doing so much sport when they're younger. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be an actual injury.
But it's of the brain and spinal area, is it? Or it's
going to affect the drainage of these mechanical, and it sometimes can be hereditary. So you can be born, unfortunately, with a genetic predisposition, and this has been shown as genetic predispositions for ME. There's about 15% of ME is familial, and there's a study done by Jesus Castro in Spain, in Barcelona. They showed 15% of patients were actually familial. And what's the familial link? You know how you look like your parents often? We usually do look like one of them or both of them.
Yeah.
But the reason why you look like that is because your facial bones are genetically follow the genes of your parents. So the bones inside the cranium, the cranial bones, could also, if there's a slight problem in one of the areas of the bones of the drainage, it could affect the next generation. Doesn't mean they're going to be. And also spine. A lot of spinal problems are run in families.
I mean, so interesting. I mean, and you say also that an emotional problem, a trauma of some sort, possibly of
Yeah,
work. I
the
mean,
biggest
an
cause of
emotional problem
neurotoxicity. Yeah, the
could
biggest cause of
actually be the final
neurotoxicity
trigger
is stress.
too.
Yeah, and the biggest cause of neurotoxicity is stress. So when you have stress, you get in build up inflammatory toxins. And one of the amazing, when my work was finally validated by them discovering there was a drainage system of the brain, because when I said this all those years ago, and I've said this before in talks, but when I came up with this hypothesis, it was not just out of the box, it was out of the universe, Brian. As you know, years ago, there was no such thing as lymphatic drainage of the brain. It didn't exist. Why? And the rationale was very simple. We need a lymphatic system for drainage of large molecules. We have the blood for small molecules, the brain, the lymphatics for large molecules. So there's no lymphatic system in the brain or spinal cord because there's a barrier, the blood-brain barrier, or the blood spinal cord barrier. There's a barrier stopping any large molecules, made of tight junctions, stopping any large molecules getting in.
Yeah.
So therefore, the blood can cope with any toxins that gets into the brain. You do not need to worry about the lymphatics. And that's why we haven't got a lymphatic system. And I said, well, that's nonsense. And against all medical thinking, I said, well, it's obviously nonsense because the hypothalamus measures hormones in the brain every second of every day. Hormones are huge molecules. Insulin's 5,808 Daltons, where Dalton's a measurement of a molecule. Water molecules, very small molecules, 18 Daltons, get through the blood-brain barrier, but huge molecules like insulin, we know it gets through because the hypothalamus measures it by a mechanism called biofeedback and sends messages back to the pancreas, in this case, to stimulate more or less insulin. So this is going on all the time in everybody. And it's one of the reasons why women get ME much more than men, because the hypothalamus is overloaded more with female hormones every month. Things go, the estrogen and progesterone levels go haywire. So this causes more strain on the hypothalamus in women than men. So that's one of the reasons.
No,
But,
it's as an osteopath, Raymond, I mean, are your treatments based upon standard osteopathic manipulations?
No, it's not.
No.
It's based on some standards osteopathic plus a special type of manual lymphatic drainage. So we use cranial techniques, and we use lymphatic drainage manual techniques, and we use some articulation. We do a bit of manipulation. The what I call the clickety pops of the spine. That's my name for it. So it's not dumbing down.
Obviously technical, that one. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Very technical, but it's actually called the high velocity, low amplitude thrust techniques, or high velocity thrust. And if you tell a patient you're going to do a high velocity thrust technique, they go, if you say, let's do a clickety pop, they're much more relaxed, especially the kids. But we don't do much manipulation. We just ease the joints generally and stretch them. But the main thing is getting the spine moving again and keeping it moving. We give exercises for that. And then, so that's the thoracic spine specifically. We work on that because that area is usually a problem. And it also the area where the sympathetic nerves that are going all wrong come out from the spine and spread around the body. But there's also the cranial, which is cranial techniques, or cranial sacral techniques. Our techniques have been used for over 100 years, and we feel a rhythm of around 8 to 12 beats a minute. And with ME patients, it's all disturbed rhythm. Now, this was actually mentioned in the BMJ paper. I was quite amazed. I think the first time the British Medical Journal ever mentioned the cranial rhythmic impulse, the cranial rhythm. It's amazing. And the reason being is because I've found the answer to the big question: what is the cranial rhythm? So most doctors and even a lot of osteopaths say it's not nonsense. There's no such thing. The cranial rhythm is a movement around 8 to 12 beats a minute. But what actually is producing this rhythm that you can feel? And when it's not working properly, there's a lot of disturbance in the body. So what are we feeling? And one of the work with my research work initially, one of the things I uncovered was the secrets behind the cranial rhythm. The cranial rhythm was this neurolymphatic drainage, and the science behind it is all based on physics. The cerebrospinal fluid is produced by the blood, and the blood has a rhythm, the heart rate, 50 to 100 beats a minute. So it's produced in what's known as a choroid plexus in the brain. And cerebrospinal fluid goes round the brain, down the spine, and goes back to the blood, back to the venous sinuses at the same rate, 50 to 100 beats a minute. So within the brain itself, cerebrospinal fluid moves at 50 to 100 beats a minute. This is accepted medical science. When we do MR scans, in neuroscience, when we do MR scans, we always put a heart rate monitor on up to if we were looking at the cerebrospinal fluid moving around the brain. So this is because it follows systole and diastole, it follows the heart rate. But now we know some of it doesn't drain back to the heart. Some of it drains through these spaces, what are known as perivascular spaces, out into the lymphatics. The lymphatic system was finally proven to exist in the brain in 2017 in the human brain. So now we know there definitely is it's called the glymphatic system, the system of lymphatic system from the glial cells of the brain, which are packing cells of the brain but do much more. But this drainage system has now been proven. So we know that fluid does drain into the lymphatics. And the lymphatics, the main pump of the lymphatics, has a pump mechanism. Can you hear me still? Sorry.
We're all still good.
I'm above my garage, and the garage door is just opening. I think my son's coming back from cycle ride.
It's good.
So basically, the thoracic duct pumps at 4 beats a minute. This was discovered by Professor John Kinmonth in London many years ago, before he died in 81. But this pumping mechanism that moves at 4 beats a minute is the main central pump of the lymphatics, controlled by sympathetic nerves. So this, now we know, cerebrospinal fluid moving at 50, 100 beats a minute drains into the lymphatic system, which has a wave of a very much slower beat of 4 beats a minute. When 2 waves come together, physics dictates what happens next. You get what's known as an interference wave, a wave between the two. And I sent all my figures to the University of Manchester's Department of Hydrodynamics and Aerodynamics to look at all the expert wave physicists there, and they came up saying it definitely could be 8 to 12 beats a minute, which is the accepted cranial rhythm. So this and it was published in 2007 in the American journal, the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. They made it front page news that the cranial rhythm has got a basis that's based on physics. And if you're not a physicist, all you have to do is go to a beach. I tell all my patients, you've been to a beach, you see a big wave coming forward, a slow wave, a very small wave going out, coming in, a slow wave going out. When they crash together, they produce a third wave, and that's what happens. And it's the same in the human body. And that cranial rhythm is the product of this drainage from the brain into lymphatics, and that explains why there's drainage through here, and why this, when it gets congested as well, you can feel pressure all around this area. Most of my patients feel this terrible pressure behind their nose, behind their eyes, around the ears, because these are the main drainage points in the cranium of the cerebrospinal fluid.
But let's talk a bit about long COVID, Raymond, because that was the advert. And now you told me just before we went on air that you're just undertaking a study now, 100 long COVID patients.
Yeah, with NHS. It's really good because it's a sponsored study by the NHS. The NHS are overseeing the whole thing in Manchester, Northern Care Alliance. And it's a study looking at the self-massage, because with the treatment, we also give patients self-massage and self-exercises to keep everything moving. And because NHS hasn't got too much funds, they're very happy with self-activity, home treatment. So they've backed us to the full, and it was a feasibility study going on to the end of the year. We needed to recruit by the end of May. We needed to recruit 100 people for the study. And we have achieved that. So that's the first goal achieved. We have recruited 100 people who are.
And they're all self-treating. They're not seeing a Perrin practitioner. Or...
No. We had half of them. It's a randomized trial. So we randomized, all done by computers. The volunteers had to be screened that they had long COVID, that had been diagnosed as COVID in the NHS, and then they had the symptoms for after 3 months. It gets diagnosed as long COVID if they've still got this major fatigue and major symptoms. And then we had to then divide them into 2 groups. So as the people volunteered, they didn't know which group they were going to go into. It was completely randomized. One group started the intervention straight away, and other people started after 3 months delay. And then they continued. Once after 3 months, they could start it, and then they carry on for the next 3 months doing the treatment self at home. And the patient group who initially started for 3 months, they continue on if they need to.
Right.
We know we've had one dropout. We don't know, I can't know who or where, but we know one patient's dropped out because they're better already. We hope it's in the treatment group.
Okay. Yeah.
But we don't know anymore. We can't know any more to the end of the study. And I'm not allowed to know anything. It's all blind. It's all randomized. Right. And then at the end of the study, hopefully we'll see. We've only had 5 dropouts in total, including one that actually was better. I think the general message coming out for people who have dropped out, they don't understand why they're doing it, because we're not allowed to go into the whole Perrin technique thing. Okay. But it gives us this whole feasibility is very good, because it shows that people do need to understand that, and when they come into clinic, I spend maybe a half an hour, sometimes even longer, going through the science behind it with the patients to explain them why they're ill in the first place. And what's going on. And when they do that, they usually we have a box of tissues there, because for the first time in their lives sometimes, and they've had years and years, they actually somebody understands why they're ill and they can explain to them. So this is why.
Raymond, give us a few ideas here. I mean, presumably treatment of long COVID is the same treatment for CFS and what have you. So what are some of the things we can do at home?
Right. Well, the simplest thing is that there's inflammation usually in the spine. So with long COVID, we see this as well. So you can easily reduce inflammation by contrast bathing, using cool and warm packs. So that's one of the things we give out to our research team, to the patients. They get a free water bottle, care of the NHS, and a free warm water and a free cool pack. And you alternate cool and warm, not boiling hot, not freezing cold, cold and warm that you can feel on your spine, mid-thoracic spine. It's usually that area. Sometimes if they've got fibromyalgia or they've got a lot of inflammation in the upper thoracic cervical dorsal region, just beneath at the bottom of the neck, we just put cold on itself. That sometimes
so helps. How long do they keep that on?
The cold and warm starts with cold. The sequence is the standard sequence is cold for 3 minutes, warm for 1 minute, cold for 1 minute, warm for 1 minute, cold for 1 minute, and then warm for 3 minutes. 10 minutes total. And you just need to rest your head and your back against a chair, against a settee. Just rest back and then hold it. You don't hold it all the time. Just rest back.
And you do that once a day?
And you do that, well, we tell people to do it 3 times a day.
3 times a day, okay.
Morning, afternoon, and evening. Okay. So that's the first thing we advise to get the inflammation down in the spine. Another thing we will tell people to do is gentle exercise for the thoracic spine to get more movement. So simple exercise we can go through now if you want, Brian.
Try it together.
Okay, so just put your hand one side. You can do this, hand there to the side, not clasped, not clasped, and not on your head, on your neck.
On the neck, on there.
Yeah, and then you just gently turn each way, just a little bit. The whole thing, not too far, not too far. So a little bit each way, and basically the angle should be around that angle. The total arc should be around 45 degrees.
Okay.
Total.
And
not
how
too
long
far.
do you do that for?
The mistake that a lot of people do is they go this and that.
Too much.
Too much, too far. It's just gently.
Slow as well. Slow as well.
Slow as well, like you're doing. And you do that each way 5 times. And then you hug your shoulders. So you hug your shoulders like so, or like that way. As long as you're touching your shoulders, and do the same thing again. Okay. Everything moving together, just gently.
And again, how many times a day?
5 times. This is 3 times a day again.
3 times.
And then fold your arms and do the same thing again. And then after that, you stand up and consider me standing up. You stand up and you rotate your shoulders forwards and backwards.
Okay.
So that's really what simple exercise that we give patients, and that's for life, because this will encourage the spine to stay loose and to enable some of the drainage to occur just simply by loosening the spine.
But when they go and see a Perrin practitioner, obviously you have a lot more cranial work going on as well.
We do cranial, we might do some clickety pops, we do some stretching, we do some lymph drainage, we do a lot of lymph drainage. And the lymph drainage this is the key to the Perrin technique. The lymph drainage isn't standard lymph drainage. Lymph drainage standardly goes towards the lymph nodes and allows the body to work better when there's sluggish lymph. So people got lymphedema, or people got congestion, they'll work, for instance, in the breast tissue, the lymph generally, a lot of it drains into the axilla, the armpit. Now you do this with an ME patient, you're going to have problems big time, because the lymph is working the wrong way. One of the things we feel for is varicose lymph, that we can fill lymph vessels lining the surface of the skin that are huge. These are called, Kim talked about them in his work, but these are varicose megalymphatics. You can't see them usually, you can feel them. These are lymph vessels called lymphangions, all stringed together. Now these lymph vessels at the surface, in the subcutaneous fascia, just underneath the skin, they should be 0.5 millimeter wide. And they're full of lymph fluid called lymph, which is colorless fluid. But what we're feeling when we feel this with ME patients and fibromyalgia and a lot of the long COVID now we're seeing, we feel huge varicose vessels that aren't varicose veins, because there's no blood in them, they're clear. And there's pictures in my book about this, showing this. And they're about 0.5 centimeter wide, not 0.5 millimeter, 0.5 centimeter wide. They've gone so big because of the backflow. So it's different. So if we do the general drainage, you're going to get more congestion this way. So the development, what I've developed is the Perrin technique is using two principles of physics. The concertina effect first. We drain downwards to the collarbone, which is where the central drainage of the lymph into the blood system is, and it drains up to these venous angles. When it goes into the blood, it goes round into the heart and then into the liver and detoxifies. But we want to get it to the blood first. It's pumping the wrong way. It's pumping up into the brain and pumping down into the rest of the body, into the muscles, which causes fatigue as well. So we want to drain them the right way. So we push up, 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 and down, 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 creating this concertina effect. That creates the next effect, which again is based on physics, the siphon effect. The siphon effect is have you ever had a fish tank and you suck? There's a famous joke in Manchester. That's how the Liverpudlians get their petrol. That's a joke. Yeah. No offense to any Liverpudlians. They come to Manchester to do the same.
Oh, no. Not digging, Raymond.
No. Anyway, no. So you basically drain. So you drain off the toxins by creating this pressure, and once it creates this pressure differential continues on more and more and more. Right. Drainage down into the bloodstream, draining up into the bloodstream.
Right. And just before we get move to the questions, does diet have to change as well? And
well, diet creates a lot of toxins, and we now know, and the nervous system has to work properly. And I'm sure you've had lots of other speakers over the years that have mentioned about the microbiome, now what we know.
Indeed.
Because the microbiome produces 90% of serotonin, 75% of all neurochemicals are produced by the microbiome. This is medical fact now. So we know that the gut health is so important, but also for the lymphatics. Remember, lymph can only be there for large molecules. So what large molecules are the most common substances that we put in our body that cause the main problem, especially with irritable bowel, gut dysbiosis? So we're talking gluten. casein in milk, not the lactose, the casein, the large the milk protein, and also yeast. Sugar creates yeast.
Right.
Gluten, casein, and yeast, they're all huge molecules that need the lymphatics to drain away. If they're not draining away from the gut, they'll build up, especially if you've got leaky gut, where more and more build up and ferment. You know, the ancient Chinese used to call about disease, used to talk about fermentation, stagnation causes disease. This is in the principles of osteopathy. Andrew Taylor Still talked about fermentation and stagnation causing disease. Disease only happens when you don't get things moving. So he said to get all the fluids moving. Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathy over 100 years ago, said that you need to get the blood moving, you need to get the lymphatics moving, and you need to get cerebrospinal fluid moving. These fluids need to be moving for health. And when they're not, you get this stagnation. But it's this backflow that now we've discovered that this causes all the problems. So all this gluten and all the casein and all the large molecules and the yeast just build up in the bowels, not draining away like they should do. So our techniques will help drain that, and we have specific specialized techniques which I teach for specialists in advanced groups for abdominal drainage as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
So
and
that helps the
posture,
diet.
injury, all these things.
So diet's important. So patients with ME should reduce gluten, should reduce casein, should reduce sugars and yeasts. And also one thing they must never have, and this is a no, as soon as they come in, I say you have to stop, and that's alcohol. Alcohol is a no. Now most patients have to say that because they said they've tried and they can't cope with any alcohol. And the reason for that is not what you think. Most people will say, oh, it's because of the liver. You need to detoxify, so the liver doesn't work properly. That's part of the reason. But the main reason is the brain. When the two chemicals in the brain that alcohol hits mostly are GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, in the basal ganglia of the brain, and also NMDA receptors in the thalamus of the brain. And when the lymphatic system was first discovered in Rochester University using new scanning techniques where they could see the drainage, they found that when it wasn't working, where did it hit in the brain? The thalamus and the basal ganglia, which are right next to the good old hypothalamus. So that whole area is affected by alcohol more than any other area of the brain. And it's also the limbic system. This is all part of the limbic system, the emotional side of your brain. So when that gets poisoned, your emotions go haywire, and most patients with ME get mood swings and everything. It's not depression, it's not anxiety, it's buildup of toxins that need to drain away. And this is the thing.
Fantastic, amazing. That's brilliant, Raymond. What a tour de force that was. I really enjoyed it. And I've got loads of questions anyway. But Molly, do we have any questions from our viewers?
Yep, we do indeed. So the first one is, I would like to know if COVID's brain fog is reversible and if your technique would be appropriate for it.
Right. Well, if you look at the brain, I haven't got the diagram on the brain with me, but if you look at the brain, you've got, so that what I said in my original paper, and this shows how mad I am. My wife, bless her, Julie, she appreciates how mad I am, because it was the announcement of COVID as a worldwide pandemic was the 11th of March 2020. Now, how do I remember that date? Because it's my anniversary. And on 11th of March 2020, instead of most people enjoying themselves, I think we had some guests around, but that night I said to Julie, when it was announced, when the World Health Organization, the General Secretary General, announced the worldwide pandemic, I said, I've got to write this paper tonight. So I stayed up all night writing this paper, which was then called Into the Looking Glass, and it's open access in Journal of Medical Hypotheses. And I said, post-COVID-19 syndrome is going to happen. Why? So what happens is the virus and the toxins and the cytokine, you heard about cytokine storm. Cytokines are signaling molecules that attach to the virus, but there's so many of them because there's so much viral load when a person gets really badly ill with COVID. They build up in the brain, and this causes the fatigue, but it goes into the nose first. What does it first cause? Anosmia, or affecting smell, affecting the taste, first cause, going through the blood-brain barrier into the brain and then into the hypothalamus, which then causes the next major symptom, which is inflammation of the fever, because the centers of fever in the brain are in the hypothalamus. But on the way there, between the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain, and the hypothalamus, is the area of the brain which is affected when you get brain fog. Because what happens is, when you get brain fog, all the thinking part to do anything, the doing part of the brain is all in the back. So anytime you have intention to do anything, talking, walking, anything, you have to first think about it, and it goes through this junction box, which is the limbic system, which is the basal ganglia and the thalamus, back to the back of the brain to get you to read, to talk, walk, whatever. And it's that area, just behind the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that's affected as the drainage goes the wrong way, as the toxins come back into the brain. So the viruses and the spike proteins and the cytokines are building up in that area, and that causes the brain fog that we see again and again and again with ME, and we're seeing this again and again with long COVID. So in effect, that's why you get the symptoms after the drainage. After the virus has gone, you've still got these toxins building up in this area, and they'll continue building up. So you get worse and worse. So you've got to drain them away. And the Perrin technique is designed exactly that. We drain off the toxins. We get all these toxins moving. And once they're gone away, the brain fog eases and you start recovering. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Another question, Molly?
Yep. Another one is, why is the backflow actually happening? Like, what causes the backflow?
Right. The backflow is controlled by sympathetic nerves. And the sympathetic nerves control virtually all the lymphatic vessels. So lymphatic vessels have a smooth muscle walls, and if the vessels are made of what they call lymphangions, so there's units. So this is one unit, and this is the next unit, and then there's another unit after. Normally, what would happen is sympathetic nerves will stimulate this unit to contract, and that forces the lymph through into the next unit, which contracts, and the next unit along. That's if the sympathetic nervous system is working correctly. What we're seeing is, because the hypothalamus is the balancer for the autonomics, for the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the vagus as well as involved. But the sympathetic, we know, control these smooth muscle walls. At the moment, that's all we know. That sympathetic nerves control these muscle units. And if they go wrong, then instead of pumping there, and then the next one along, the next one, it could pump this way, and then that way, or that way. And it then doesn't allow normal drainage, it then has a backflow. So it's not causing a stagnation of lymph, it's just saying some is going forward, and then some is going back, and then it's going forward again, it's going back. And that's why you don't get lymphedema generally in ME. Sometimes you do, but it's very rarely. And in long COVID, you see these varicose lymph forming, and you can feel them beneath the skin. And sometimes we can actually see them. And in my book, I've got a picture of actually one we could see. It's so big. And this is why you get this backflow of lymph and back, because it's the sympathetic dysfunction. It's what now we call dysautonomia. And now I said this in 1989. This is what was happening.
Wow. Okay, Molly, another one.
Yep. Can your technique get my smell and taste back? Which
actually, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We've had a few patients come in saying, "Can you do this?" We can, and we do. I'm not guarantee it, but if we work on this area and get the drainage working properly, then hopefully the toxins haven't caused permanent damage to olfactory organs. If they have caused permanent damage, then that's unfortunately we can't. But in many cases, the quicker the better. The quicker we get there, the better. And but saying that, my dear mum, who's just coming out from hospital tomorrow, she's 91 and she's had all sorts of problems. She lost her smell with COVID, and she said, "Ray, can you do treatment?" And I said, "Mum, I can't do it on you." She's got major problems in her nose. She gets nosebleeds all the time, and if I did any treatment on there, it'd probably stimulate a nosebleed, and she then sometimes has to go to hospital because she gets the severe ones. So unfortunately, with my mum, I can't do it. But generally, if there's no major problems in the nose, in the blood vessels of the nose, then we can usually do a good job there, opening it up and draining off. And yeah, we can help that.
Great. Okay. Molly?
So I think this is relating to what we've first talked about in the chat. Could cranial osteopathy relieve the issues in babies, especially the firstborn?
Yeah, which is what we do all the time. But a lot of cranial osteopaths don't know it's helping the drainage. But whenever I do cranial, and it's what I teach around the world, when I'm teaching it, I say you've got to incorporate lymphatic drainage as well. So we do cranial techniques, but we do drainage down as well. We massage downwards. And a lot of osteopaths and physios and massage therapists will do kneading of the neck, and they'll go up, up, up. So I have to reverse their teaching and go, no, you go down, never up, because that's going against the drainage, and it's actually creating more problems. But we were never taught that. We were never taught that there was a drainage of the brain. So what's the problem? But no, so they've always got to go. So we do cranial, and then do some of my techniques to add lymphatic drainage, and I do that for everybody. And babies love being massaged. So they coo when you actually do cranial. And so I always incorporate with cranial lymphatic drainage, and it should be part of it. And it was Sutherland who developed cranial osteopathy. It was a disciple of Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathy. They both stressed the lymphatic drainage of the brain, the waters of the brain. They called it drain to lymphatics. So it's always been part of osteopathy, but it's just forgotten. Because for years, because once they realized there was a blood-brain barrier, all scientists had this theory for years, and it was eventually proven that the blood-brain barrier existed in the early 60s. People said, well, there's obviously no lymphatics there. But they didn't realize that there are. And there's gaps in the blood-brain barrier, big gap. 7 major gaps to allow hormones to go in, to allow electrolytes, salts and sugars into the brain. And so there's 7 what we call circumventricular organs in the brain, 7 areas, 2 in the hypothalamus, allowing toxins in. So you need the drainage. So cranial alone can often damage the patient. So if they just did cranial without lymphatic drainage, if there's a major congestion, they do cranial and the patient gets worse and worse and worse. I think, what's going on? My head feels like it's exploding, because they're not doing the whole lymphatic drainage as well. So when I teach my courses, I teach undergraduate lymphatic courses around the world, I always tell them you've got to do lymph drainage as well as cranial.
And so getting your sense of smell back, sooner the better to get treatment.
Hopefully. I can't guarantee it. It depends how much damage the toxins have done. And this is, everybody's different, but it should help.
Okay. Molly?
Do you think there have been things added to vaccines that have compromised the blood-brain barrier?
The big question. You must have mentioned the V word. Right. I'll just say what I said to a conference, ME conference, a couple of years ago. I said, knowing that vaccines contain sometimes chemicals that patients don't tolerate, what is our advice when the new vaccines come out? This was over 2 years ago. And none of the panel answered, because in America, they're not allowed to talk about vaccines at all. They can get struck off doctors if they give any advice on vaccines. Vaccines, in my opinion, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. In my opinion, vaccines have been a necessary evil. I say evil because for some people have not agreed with it at all, and some people have lost their lives because of the vaccines. It's known. People had blood clots and things. So for those people, for those unfortunate individuals, it's a terrible thing. But for the general population as a whole, we're back to, I'm going live to a conference because I've had vaccines, and the world's been vaccinated enough to allow the world to heal a bit, and we are able to get back to some normality again. And people say, well, it's not to do with vaccines. Well, I disagree. The science behind vaccines is very sound. However, vaccines do contain a lot of toxins. Years ago, the vaccines were terrible. Years ago, they used to contain standard stock-powered vaccine contained preservative thimerosal.
Mm.
And thiamelazol's main ingredient, Brian, mercury.
Methyl
I
mercury.
know. So this was we're injecting mercury into everybody. I mean, years ago, we didn't think anything of it. We put mercury thermometers in our mouths. We used to play with mercury, and I
Put it in your
was
teeth.
amazed. And all the mercury in the teeth still going on. Amalgam fillings are still being given. As, But so the thing is, mercury is a danger. And then they changed it. They stopped that in most. And then they started an adjuvant which stimulates the vaccine called aluminium oxide, which is not a heavy metal, but it's still a neurotoxin. It's still metal, and it's still neurotoxin, aluminium. So this is a problem with vaccines. Now, the new vaccines for COVID haven't got thiamelazole in, and they haven't got aluminium oxide in, but they have a lot of chemicals that some patients cannot tolerate. So this is a big question mark. Now, so my basic advice to all patients is you make your own decision. The only patients I would say do not have a vaccine are ones who have got mast cell activation syndrome, which is where they've got a basically major problem in tolerating any chemicals at all, or they've got major chemical sensitivities. So if they do, even the companies that produce the vaccines would say, and those patients probably shouldn't have the vaccine because they're going to suffer. So, but the general thing I think is that it's up to the patient's individual ideas of what they want. But I don't believe in any of these conspiracy theories that they're trying to kill us all. Okay.
Okay. All right. Molly, do you have another one for us?
I do. Someone has asked, what is the effect of mobilizing toxins from the brain on the rest of the body?
Yes. Well, it's the one proof that I'm not a placebo effect. Perrin technique patients, when they start, they don't usually like me very much. In fact, there was James Dellingpole is one of the a journalist who actually has a podcast. He said in I don't know what was a new was it New Statesman or one of
you must have the Spectator.
The Spectator, that's it, Spectator. So in the Spectator magazine, he said, I'm going bonkers. He said, this new treatment I'm having is driving me nuts. So that was the beginning, as the chemicals came out. And most patients, it's real, I always say to patients, it does what it says on the tin. The Perrin technique is designed to drain off toxins, and it's real toxins. If we drain them all off in one go, if we, patients say, oh, can you just get it all out now? If we did, we'd kill most of our patients, because we're dealing with years and years and years of build-up of toxins. So we've got to be careful. So you've got to make sure that you can cope. So it's bit by bit by bit, softly. We do it gently, and we see how the patient responds, and it's patient-led. And every patient is an individual. So we can't say this works for this patient. How we do it very intensely for one patient, it might be very gently for another. It all depends on what level they are. And when we originally see a patient, we work out a score, we work out a severity score. I have a 0 to 10 scale. I always joke with the patient, 0 is dead, but you're lucky you're not 0. And then 10 out of 10 is perfectly healthy. And we want them to get to that stage. But if they're very severe, we do it very gently. If they're less severe, we do it more. But there's going to be a lot of toxins coming out over the time. And we don't know what toxins are in there. Thousands of different chemicals could be. And this toxic soup could be really, really bad. So we do it very gently, and we see, hopefully, the body copes. We give supplements to help. One of the best supplements is not really a supplement. The best foods to help the liver cope best, I tell every patient to take this, is ginger. Ginger is the liver loves ginger. Some people don't like ginger, but the liver loves ginger. So anything with ginger in is going to help the liver cope with toxins. There's milk thistle as well. You have to be careful, especially with there's certain patients that cinnamon milk thistle extract is not very good for, but that is something we generally give as an advice as well. But anything to help the liver cope better, and drink plenty. Got to drink 2 liters a day. Animals, when they're poisoned, they all go to water holes. So you just follow what animals do instinctively. Just drink plenty, and that help detoxify. But so I'd say 2 liters a day of water usually for an adult. So yeah, so it can affect you badly to begin with, and we want to listen to the patient. So if the patient comes back the next day and says, I've been in bed since your last treatment, I can't move much since I do, then you just go more gently the next time and listen to the patient. Yeah.
I suppose every patient's individual. You can't really give a time as to how long this process
No, but we have there's a guide in my book on the scoring system. So if somebody's a 5 out of 10, it would take around a year to get them as well as possible. And if they're much lower than that, say a 3 out of 10 might take 2 years. Right. We don't see anybody over the 7 out of 10 really coming in, because there's a lot of people live with ME without even knowing it. Just living with general fatigue. If they do too much to feel it, and they just think, oh, that's life. So there's a lot of people out there who could probably benefit from the treatment, but don't even know they've got it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Molly, do you have another one?
So a lot of people are asking about the specifics of the self-massage and the cool and warm packs. Is there anywhere they can go to find the info on that?
Yeah, get the book. I'm not trying to sell the book, but no, in the book it's got, have you got to, that's the
well, we've got 2 books. I mean, this one is probably good enough. It was the one for patients, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's why we made
Concise Perrin technique.
Yeah, it's on Kindle as well. It's a patient handbook. The big book, which I have here, is if you want to know all the science and everything else behind it, and all extra things and more severe cases and other comorbidities like POTS and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and all the things that I mentioned in the big book. But that's more for the doctors, for the scientists, for the osteopaths who want to treat you. They should all read this book. But for your own, you can get the book. But hopefully, as I'm training people all over the world, and hopefully as time goes on, more and more practitioners are being trained. I'm training up a group which are going to qualify this year for advanced practitioners, who they themselves will hopefully be able to train others as well. But it's 34 years of work. It's hard to get it all in. We're doing a 2-year course for the advanced practitioners.
I suppose it's fair. Are you still learning as well, Raymond?
I'm always learning from patients all the time. We'll never stop. I mean, one of the things I was talking about before we started was we've just been discovered by researchers in the States and in Denmark that there's a membrane lining the brain that nobody knew existed. It's called the SLIM, the subarachnoid lymphatic-like membrane. It's part of the meninges, the membranes of the brain, dividing the subarachnoid space, which we thought was just one space with cerebrospinal fluid in. It's divided into 2 areas. The outside is the drains off some of the toxins, and the inside of next to the brain, nearer the brain, that is the healthy stuff. So as the toxins drain away, the healthy stuff replaces it. But there's only divided by a very thin layer, almost most points only 1 cell thick, and that goes round the head and down the spine. So any traumas, any injuries, any illnesses, because it's got lymphatic-like, it's got immune cells on it, so it can cause damage to this SLIM, S-L-Y-M. And this was only discovered this year. And it's tremendous from our point of view. It's bad for some patients because they've got a very bad damaged SLIM. It means it's much harder to drain off the toxins, because as we drain off the unhealthy stuff, the new stuff, which should be full of healthy chemicals and healthy fluids, shares some of the bad stuff that's coming out, because it's going back in through these spaces, damage. And it could be from trauma, it can be from infections, and one of the things, it can be induced by needles going into the spinal cord. So people who have had lumbar punctures, we've said this for years, and I've said this, I'm a bit worried about anybody having a lumbar puncture with ME, because it could easily damage the spinal integrity. But now we know in most cases the needle will go through the SLIM, and doctors never knew it existed till just this year.
Incredible.
So lots of people will have had worse problems when they've had investigative lumbar punctures, and now they know why. Yeah.
And Molly, do we have any last questions, Molly? Or I
And
suppose
do
they're
you have-
loads of questions, aren't there?
yeah. So, yeah.
Well,
I
we've
get
got to
more and more
wrap it up fairly
questions.
soon.
Yeah.
We've got to wrap it up fairly soon.
Yeah.
So they're quite specific now, but how do you clear, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing this right, lymphedema from a swollen ankle as a result of several bouts of cellulitis?
Right, yeah, that's different. That's going to a lymphatic drainage expert. When lymphedema is more when there's a sluggish sluggish lymph or damage to lymphatic vessels. So there's no lymph draining out. So that causes the fluid to build up. And that requires manual lymphatic drainage experts to do things like VODA technique, Fodley technique, decompression bandages, plus specific techniques to help lymphedema. So you can look up on the web for manual lymphatic drainage technicians or manual lymphatic drainage experts. There are specific practitioners that do that. It's not part of the Perrin technique. This is different to when we're dealing with backflow of lymph, the varicose lymphatics, not lymphedema itself. But you can use some of the techniques, some effleurage techniques, some massage techniques to help this. And sometimes we do lymph drainage techniques, but there are specific techniques for lymphedema that you can get from special centers. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Shall we squeeze one more question in, Molly?
Yeah, of course. So this is relating to what you just spoke about before about the slim. She says, what about women who have epidurals for birth? Is there any damage done to them?
It can be. If the epidurals go too deep, they can damage the slim. Yeah. And it shouldn't do, but when you have a leakage of cerebrospinal fluid afterwards, and they said there's been a bit of a leakage after epidural, the doctor's gone too deep, and then that could easily gone into the subarachnoid space, allowing fluid to come out, and that could easily have gone too deep and damaged the slim. Yeah.
But the slim can be repaired.
Well, the skin damages and heals up, so we hope the slim does. But
the same applies.
Hopefully it is. It's just been discovered, Brian, so we have no idea.
I've got that far yet. Okay.
But hopefully with scanning techniques, I'm in talks with people who have got major scanning technology. Hopefully my dream one day is to have my own research center with the top scanning, when we can do all this research to see what's going on and to show how we can repair it and how we can help. So there's a lot of work to done. I've been doing this for 34 years. I'm 63 now. Hopefully I've got a few more years left. Hopefully.
You look a very young 63, Raymond.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Very good.
I don't dye my hair. It's just I'm a freak of nature. What can I do?
Very good. Well,
I do the Perrin technique on myself every night. No, I should say I do. Yeah. Thanks.
We're going to have to leave it because I know there are more questions, but
okay.
Raymond's given his time. We mentioned his 2 books. Let's mention them again. The Concise Perrin Technique. I think it's the one that everyone should have. It's the one with all the self-treatments that you can get. If you really want to dig deeper into the science, there is the Perrin Technique itself. Quite a meaty read, this, but it's, if you really want to go deeper. And of course, the place to go next is to Raymond's website anyway, and there you'll find more details. theperrintechnique.com, theperrintechnique.com, where I think you also find a list of practitioners as well. Is that right?
Yeah. We're growing. I mean, a year ago we had 100 or so practitioners around the world. We've now got around the world 150. So we're growing all the time. I think these are licensed practitioners who've all been trained by myself, by the way.
Well done. Yeah. I think you're brilliant. Actually,
oh.
I think you're brilliant. Why you weren't in Boris's honours list, I don't know, but maybe in the next one.
Thank you, Brian. You're doing an amazing job with your work as well. So
thank you. So I think you're a real. I think everyone had some real light bulb moments during this hour. I know I did, and I think it sort of makes so much sense for so many people because, it's been such an enigma, this disease, if you call it that. Yeah. Where everyone's different and no one can explain it, and I think this does, and I think it's brilliant. I really do. I think everyone's really enjoyed this. I think they're going to benefit so much from what you've been saying this evening, Raymond. And
Thank you very much.
so thank you for doing all this work.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, bye-bye, everyone, and hopefully we can help you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Well, you have to go to his website next. And our next talk is going to be on July the 5th with Dr. Thomas Levy, who I suppose is probably the most expert person now on the planet for vitamin C, now that Linus Paulding has passed. So Thomas is going to be on. He's going to tell us all about why we need to take loads and loads of vitamin C and what it does for us. So I'm sure Raymond would approve of that as well. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for all your questions. Sorry we didn't get to everyone. We knew we wouldn't tonight, but no doubt you go to Raymond's site, read his books. A lot of questions will be asked. Thank you all, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you again, Raymond.
Thank you.
Absolutely outstanding. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.